Matthew Holt. This is another THCB spotlight. It's been a while, and I'm catching up with a slightly unusual tech company called Callisto, who have been around and about on THCB and Health 2.0 some years ago, but I haven't caught up for a while. This is Tracy DeTomasi. She is the CEO of Callisto, which is a non-profit, Tracy, why don't you explain it? It's a non-profit that does a very specific task for victims of sexual violence.
Yes,
So what is
exactly.
that? What are you up? What are you doing? What is that task? Tell us a bit about the flavor of what Callisto is doing.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, Callisto is working to connect survivors of repeat perpetrators. And so, what that means is that if a survivor wants to find out if their perpetrator has harmed someone else, which most survivors do, we have built technology to help them do that in a secure fashion without them publicly having to come forward.
Okay, so this is obviously linked to the fact that most perpetrators of sexual violence, rape, sex assault, all the stuff, especially those in organizations like institutions like colleges and workplaces, a lot of those people, the data, and don't have the exact data, you might have it, show that a lot of the incidents are from a relatively small minority, usually of men, but not
Yes,
exclusively men, who are repeat offenders. And of course, the typical victim doesn't know about that, but
right.
may have a suspicion about it. And this is a way so that victims, survivors can record that without necessarily having to go down the legal channel straight away or to talk to people at
Exactly.
school. Just for a second, explain what is the situation for people who are having to go down the,
It's pretty
have them,
horrendous.
why would they not want to go down the path of reporting it?
Yeah. So just to go back a little bit into what you said. So right now our technology is available to anybody in the US and its territories with a .edu. So we're really focused on college campuses.
Yeah.
And in college campuses, 90% of sexual assaults are committed by serial perpetrators who on average offend 6 times while in college. And so right now the systems are not connecting those survivors. And if we can get down to connecting two survivors after two assaults, and we can hold that perpetrator accountable, we would reduce, before getting to that 6 assaults on average, we would reduce college sexual assault by 59%. So that's the premise that we're working on. And right now, less than 10% of people report to Title IX or to police if they've been assaulted. So it's one of the most underreported crimes ever. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Often survivors are not believed. They're not believed by their friends, their family, and in particular the justice systems that is meant to protect them. So there are a lot of really good law enforcement out there, but there's a lot of really bad law enforcement out there. When they report, they're asked what they're wearing, how much were they drinking, was it your fault, and they're blamed for the crime that was
Yeah, I mean,
committed
we're
against
basically
them.
still back in this 1960s or everywhere, or 50s for half the stuff. But
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it was only until the 90s that they changed the law to say that you didn't have to fight back in order for it to be considered rape.
yeah.
And we know that from trauma, most survivors freeze if they've experienced sexual assault. So they're not going to fight back because it's a biological response to trauma and to assault to freeze when what happens, which, because of the misconceptions of sexual assault, a lot of survivors don't even identify that what happened to them was sexual assault or rape, because what we see as rape is somebody jumping out of the bushes or in a parking garage and coming to attack us, and it's really, really brutal. It's not your best friend's roommate. It's not somebody that you know on campus. It's not your significant other that does it. But 80 to 90% of sexual assault survivors, particularly on college campuses, know their perpetrator, which is why Callisto works, because you do have to have the identity of your perpetrator in order to use our system.
All right. So that's a great idea. How has this been adopted at college campuses? When I remember when Jess Ladd, who was the CEO, started this, the original founding CEO started this. The goal was to have many, college campuses were, I think, obliged to report this
Yeah,
or
so
both.
there
Is that still the case?
it's
How's the rollout been essentially?
yeah. We've evolved a lot since Jess's
Yeah.
initial idea, and it's because sexual assault has evolved, and she realized a lot of the barriers in that. And so her original idea was to sell this technology to Title IX offices on college campuses in the US for them to have another tool. And when the matching happened, it went directly to the Title IX offices. And she realized fairly quickly that that wasn't going to work for a variety of reasons. Some was that the schools didn't want to pay for it. They didn't have the budget. They didn't want to invest in technology, a lot of the different things. Survivors said that they wanted something before reporting to Title IX. Some of the survivors who had matched, excuse me, had also said, the first survivor who matched may have waited 6 months. And then by that point, it was automatically going to Title IX and an investigation would start. And that person would not be ready to do an investigation at that time because of whatever's going on in their life, because investigations are very traumatic and very overwhelming and very time consuming. The other thing that was never said, but that we know, is that a lot of college campuses don't want to actually identify serial perpetrators because it makes their campus quote unquote look bad, when really, if they identify more of these serial perpetrators, it shows the public that they're actually doing something about it, because reporting is so low on college campuses, that they say that the less um, assaults that are happening and being reported, the safer the campus, which is actually untrue. It just means that they're not dealing with it as well. And so we would have identified a lot of these serial perpetrators who, in many cases, would cost the universities a significant amount of money if there was enough survivors to come together and collectively sue the universities. You can look at the case of Larry Nassar at Michigan State University, and that Larry Nassar is the um, USA gymnastics doctor who was employed by Michigan State University, who assaulted over 100 women and girls. And he had been reported numerous times to Michigan State, as well as the police, over the span of over a decade. And he was never held accountable because those systems didn't work. And so, kind of going back to your previous question, a lot of the times people think that sexual assault reporting is like an episode of Law and Order SVU, but that couldn't be further from the truth. So they think that all of the systems are connected and there's somebody with multiple computer screens looking for the suspect and connecting all of the different databases across the country that they might have been a part of. That is not the case at all. Even internal systems are not always connecting these cases, because if you report somebody and that's found unfounded, or you didn't finish that, or the perpetrator left that school and that case gets closed without being finished, that doesn't come up again if that perpetrator is reported again in many cases. And so there needs to be a different system that's connecting all of this for folks so they can find each other either after they report and it didn't work, after they reported and it did work, or before they reported and they want to see if it's even worth reporting or that they will be believed, because so many sexual assaults happen behind closed doors and there's not a lot of evidence beyond that. Even when they have evidence, I mean, I know numerous tales of survivors who have it on video, who have it on text message, who have incredible amounts of evidence, and they still cannot get their crimes prosecuted. And so, Jess back in the day really created this way to help schools, but what we did is take it out of the schools. And so now what happens is that anybody with a .edu email address in the US and its territories has free access. And so we do not charge schools, we do not charge survivors, and the schools can no longer be a gatekeeper to the system. Now, some of the schools really want to partner with us and they want to provide this free resource to their students and their faculty members, because again, professors and faculty will also have access to this, and they want to do that. And then some schools are not interested in partnering with us or spreading the word for a variety of reasons, but we work with their students, or we work in any way possible that we can with those schools to spread the word.
So let's take a look at what actually happened. So now I've had there's been an incident. I've been assaulted. Whatever. What I may have heard about Callisto with social media. I may have not have. I may go to the website. What's my experience like? What do I do? Show us what happens next.
Yeah. So a lot of times, most people hear about us on social media. So people can follow us at Callisto on Instagram, or LinkedIn. And so a lot of times people are going to come to our website. So this is the homepage of our website. And it really just says what we want to do. Want to find out if your perpetrator harmed somebody else with Callisto, you can. And so they're going to use this sign up button. in order to create an account. And so they have to have that .edu email address to create an account, and we're going to verify that. But then they're going to set up their account with their personal email address because that .edu is one, it's not confidential, and two, they might lose it after they graduate. And so they're actually going to set up their account with their Gmail or their Outlook or whatever. And then I will take you to what we call Callisto Vault. So this is our system, and this is what the survivor, once they sign up, will see. I want to make sure that it switched screens. Can you see?
Yep.
Yep, okay. And so this is exactly what the survivors will see when they log in for the first time. And so if they want to find out if their perpetrators harmed somebody else, they're going to enter into matching. And it's fairly quick and simple. So the first thing they're going to do is say what state the incident occurred in. And that's because sexual assault laws vary and sexual assault definitions vary by state. So let's say that they were assaulted in Illinois. They're going to pick Illinois. If it happened outside of the US, there's an option for that. And then they're going to get hit next. This is going to be the most difficult part for survivors, but we want a survivor to enter in an offender's unique identifier. So it's a social media handle like X. So if they have an X handle, they can enter as many as they want. Let's say it's Instagram. They can enter as many as they want. They can do an email address. They can do a phone number, a YouTube, Twitch, whatever the case may be. And we encourage them, you can see up here on the top, we encourage them to enter as many as they know, because that's going to increase the likelihood of a match.
So the match is only based on getting the same thing. So two survivors will have to both put in the Instagram or the X, or you can't. There's no system, I assume, for like saying, okay, well, this is Matthew on Instagram, this is Matthew on Twitter. Actually, Mark, it's easy because I'm portable everywhere.
Yes,
hopefully that
correct. It has to be a direct match. So it has to be a Twitter to Twitter match or an Instagram to Instagram match. Now,
and presumably, given this age, I would think Snapchat and Instagram are 90% of the
most of our matches, well, most of our entries, I would say, are on Instagram, but we have a variety. People are using all of these, and we're consistently adding. Like we're getting ready to add Blue Sky and Truth Social because we know that those are platforms that are being used more and more.
I can think of one offender on Truth Social, but that's by the by. Anyway, so now you've done this. So keep going.
So you've done this, and that's what we match on. Okay. And I'll get to that in a second. But then the last thing that you would do is you'd enter your information. So you would enter your name, the language. So when we reach out to you, we know that we're speaking in the language that you understand, and any accessibility needs if you have a disability that would help us when we reach out to you. Then you're going to say what your preferred method of contact is, phone or email, and then you'll enter those in. Mine are already entered because they're already pre-filled because I use this a lot for demos.
Yep.
And they're going to review their entry to make sure that it's all right. And then they're going to say that they're entering into matching for themselves and not another person. We don't want to talk to witnesses. We want to talk to the survivor.
Yep.
And then they're going to consent to being contacted by a legal options counselor if there is a match. And that is no cost to the survivor. The survivor doesn't have to pay anything. And at that point, they submit their entry. And that's all they have to do. And then they're given a list of resources. And so now I'll explain, I'll stop sharing for a second and I'll explain what happens with that match. So first of all, our system is completely end-to-end encrypted. And what that means is that all of our data before it hits our server, it's saved in that encrypted state. So it gets encrypted and then it's saved. And so it's impossible to hack into our system. We've had third parties that have tried unsuccessfully as part of our security measures. And so it's really safe, and this data is extremely safe. So as that every day our matching system is running in the background. And so if two people put in that same Instagram account of their perpetrator, there's a match. We check that out to make sure that it is indeed a real match. And what we can see at Callisto is the state where the assault occurred. We can see the school that the survivor attended and any of those language and accessibility needs. What we can't see is the name or contact information of the survivor, and we cannot see the perpetrator's information either. And we've done that specifically because lists that you can sort through get sued for defamation, and we are not a registry, and we are not a list that people can sort through. We are not a warning system. We are really about connecting those survivors. So then what we do is that we take that and we assign that case to a legal options counselor who has a different login with a different set of encryption keys, and they get to see the entire entry. And what they will do, so they are a confidential advocate that's protected under legal confidentiality laws. And they will reach out to the survivors separately. And when the survivor gets contacted by that legal option counselor, they have a choice to make. And that choice is first to meet with that person or not. If they choose to meet with that person, they will then say what happened to them. That's the first time the survivor has to say what happened to them, because we know that explaining your story over and over can be re-traumatizing. So we don't want to put survivors in the position to have to do that unnecessarily. So they say what happened to them, and then they ask their questions. What do they want to know? And that legal option counselor will also tell them what are their potential options for a criminal court or a civil case or a Title IX case or mental health challenges or, mental health services, whatever that case may be. It might even be, what are the implications if I blast my perpetrator's name on social media? Like, what are the implications to me? And so they go over all of that. And then the legal option counselor will talk about meeting with the other person who is matched with them. Then that's when the survivor has another choice to make. Do they want their information known? Do they want their identity known? And the legal option counselor will go through all of the risks of that. And if all of the survivors or any of the survivors or consent, I should say, the legal option counselor works to connect them and will put them in contact. And then it's their job to pursue healing and justice, whatever that means for the survivor, which we know that's a variety of things. Some people are going to want to confront the perpetrator. Some people are just going to want to get therapy. And some people are going to want to go to the police or Title IX. What we don't do is investigate what happened, and we don't report it. So we don't report to police, we don't report to Title IX, and we don't report to HR. And we don't report because we know that reporting can be very traumatic for survivors, and we believe that that's a choice that survivors need to make. That is not a choice that we are going to make. But what we do is help survivors navigate that, and we give them referrals for places within their community that they can go to for mental health help, for Title IX, and we connect with those Title IX offices if that's what they choose. But we don't do any of that without the survivor's consent. And so again, we make sure to put the survivors in the driver's seat, so it is a choice that they have along the way. So if they start the process and they think, I don't ever want the other person to know who I am, they can still match, they can still know there's a match, and they can still get that legal option counseling help without ever then having to identify themselves. And after they go through all that, if they change their mind and say, I actually do want to meet with that other person, they can do that as well.
So a lot of sort of options and possibilities that you're allowing there, but basically Callisto stopped at this point. You've now referred them on to the legal options counselor,
Correct.
who may refer them to whatever. How does that match? How does that connect back to the idea of identifying these perpetrators who've done things multiple times? Presumably, if this was like every time, the original idea of essentially automating the issue and bringing it up to the university, and without the reporter, without the survivors having to basically be involved, may or may not have been a great idea, but at least that sort of promoted the fact that there was an issue here. Presumably this could happen, and let's say that any of the survivors said, I don't want to go through this again. I want my own path of counseling or whatever. That perpetrator could still be out there, even though they're in the database, having been connected by two or more victims.
Yep. Yeah, so there's a couple of different things. We're focused on survivors first. Yep. And so the survivors' well-being is the first thing. Holding perpetrators accountable is the second thing, which that's out of our hands, really. That is the system's hands, which we know the system doesn't do very well, because less than 99% of perpetrators walk free and never experience any level of accountability. So we know that system doesn't work very well, which is why a lot of survivors don't report. And then the third step, long term, is changing these systems and using the data to change the system. We do know from a recent survey that we did is that 83% of our users are reporting. And so as we continue with data and as we continue measuring it and as we continue studying it, we believe that there's going to be an increase of reporting because we know that perpetrators are more likely to be held accountable when more survivors come forward. We saw that with Me Too. We saw that with Larry Nassar, with Harvey Weinstein, with Jeffrey Epstein. But there is a huge value for the survivors in just knowing that they're not the only one. And I just mentioned Epstein, and one of our biggest supporters is Jess Michaels, and I can share that, like, she has allowed me to share this story. But she was a 1991 survivor of Jeffrey Epstein, and she lived for almost 3 decades with this knowledge that she was raped by Epstein, and she thought she was the only one. Until 2017 or 2018, she was reading reading a newspaper, and she saw this article in the Miami Herald that put his face up there. She
Yeah.
didn't know his name, and she saw his face, and that was the first day her healing began because she knew at that time that all of these worries and all of these concerns that she had for freezing and everything else were not her fault, that he had continued to do this to other people. It is not the responsibility of survivors to protect other survivors. It is the responsibility of the system to protect all survivors. And so if survivors want to report and they want to report because they want to help other people and to make sure this perpetrator doesn't harm anybody else, they get to do that. But I want to make sure that survivors who are out there who did not report and will not report understand that it is not their responsibility to protect others from somebody else's harm, like wrongdoing. It is the perpetrator's responsibility and it is the system's responsibility to protect others, because the survivors often can't. And again, even the survivors who have reported often don't get justice. And if you look at the DNA kits, the rape kits that are done, and the lack of accountability with those, and just a lot of other things that I could do a whole nother hour on, you'll understand that so many survivors have reported and still didn't get justice, even with serial perpetrators.
Yeah, and that, shocking but true. To a very minor point, you picked a state at the start there. Does if somebody reports a perpetrator in another state, does that match as well?
Yes. So
Okay,
we
so
have, yeah. So it doesn't matter who the perpetrator is. This is a great question. It doesn't matter who the perpetrator is. The perpetrator does not have to be connected to the university. They don't have to be
sure,
connected to anything. We do have matches that one survivor lives on one coast, one
yeah,
survivor lives on another coast, because we know that survivors move and we know that perpetrators move. And
sure.
so that's a really
I was
great
just checking. I
question.
mean, this is why apparently we have fewer serial killers now because police databases go across county lines, and if you listen to my wife's obsessed with the true the my favorite murder true crime podcast, and apparently, yeah, back in the 80s and before that, there were people like, oh, I moved across the county lines, I start killing again, no one notices. Hang on,
Well, I
all
mean,
these same dead bodies.
honestly, though, that's happening. That
Yeah,
that there's actually a case in Louisiana that happened 5 or 10 years, maybe less than 10 years ago, where the perpetrator was reported at 3 different schools, reported to the police, and he just kept dropping out of the school and then starting at another school
yeah,
and raped like numerous women. And was never held accountable because the systems actually could have talked to each other, but they weren't talking to each
right,
other.
right. So that's one. So tell me a bit about. So now you have this shift where Callisto is available to anybody. You're publicizing yourselves via social media. Tell me a bit about how you're publicizing yourselves.
Mhm.
And the second question, I know this came up because you guys had a sort of financial meltdown a little while ago and put out some
We did.
deals, and then it seemed to have come back from the brink. But talk about what is the funding model behind Callisto to make this work. Um,
Yeah.
and then tell me a bit about sort of
Yeah.
how the quote unquote business model for a nonprofit
Sure.
like you.
Yeah. So you asked about like how do we spread the word
Yeah,
basically. Mostly through social media is where people are hearing about us. And so, that's a big part of it. We also have Callisto ambassadors who are volunteers, that are students who spread the word on their campus by tabling events, by going to their dorms, by going to sorority and fraternities to tell them that they have access to this to the system. And so we have really passionate survivors. Most of them are survivors, not all of them, but survivors and allies who really want to spread the word because they think that this is important. We do work with administrations, we work with student government organizations, we work with anybody that want to work with us, including local rape crisis centers, state and local coalitions, anybody who's working with college students or interested in working with survivors, we will work with to start to spread the word. There's a on our website, we have a free downloadable toolkit where you can download posters and different materials to be able to spread the word. And so I would encourage people to look at that. But as far as our funding, we are 100% philanthropically funded. We don't get government funding, which thank goodness, because most government funding is going away for victim services. But we have the support of foundations and individual donors, really. And so, like you mentioned, we had quite a funding crisis. When Jess Ladd, our founder, who you mentioned, left in 2020, there was some instability. We had a pandemic. We were changing the technology at that time. We had a new CEO that was between Jess and I. And so there were some leadership changes that didn't work out. And then I started 2 years after Jess left. And so that's a lot for an organization within 2 years,
Sure.
for any organization. And we managed to keep it going for a while with changing the technology, and which changed our funding stream and changed our marketing components as well. And we ran out of funding. We hit this cliff where we thought we had some more money coming in and we didn't. And we ended up having to close our doors. And the day that we announced that, Arnold Ventures came in and said, we want to make sure that you're solid. And survivors across the globe, not even through the US, started donating and started spreading the word because they knew the power of this. And it was completely surprising. We were not expecting to stay open. And here we are 6, 7, 8 months later. And so we rely on people who want to spread the word, who want to do a fundraiser at their house, who want to run a 5K or do a 5K in their neighborhood to support Callisto, who will, we've got somebody, Mine Not Yours Candles, who's selling candles that a part of the proceeds go to Callisto. And we're looking for more people who really, really want to support us and to either create their own fundraiser or to give, because we want to keep these services free for survivors. And one of the reasons that we had some funding issues too is to put it in context. Less than 2% of all charitable giving in the US goes to women and girls issues. And
Like
of
venture
that
capital in
less,
that case, right?
Mhm.
Almost none of that goes to women founders either. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so of that less than 2%, that includes breast cancer research. So if you see all the Susan G. Komen things, which is absolutely necessary and we need to give money to, it includes reproductive rights, it includes all of this stuff. And it's such a small portion of everything. Sexual assault is also very difficult to market. Meta shuts down our ads and our boosted posts because they either say it's inappropriate because we're using the word sexual assault or rape, um, or they say it's political. And that's going to continue, even more so in the future, we believe. And so that is really difficult as well. And so there's a lot of challenges in this space, and it's not something that there's not a good soundbite for what Callisto does because people don't understand why we exist or the need for us, which is also another challenge. But we have overcome a lot of it. However, again, with victim services being cut, I mean, 500 organizations lost contracts last week. And it's going to continue. The Office of Violence Against Women is no longer doing any grants. That's going to shut down most domestic violence and rape crisis centers. So we hope that we're still good, but all nonprofits right now are struggling. And so we need to keep this vital resource alive, especially if all these rape crisis centers close, because victim services are being attacked.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the many appalling acts of vandalism that have been carried out by the new administration, and in some ways, it's good that you're not darkening the line of fire in Arnold Ventures, which is a little bit controversial in the wider healthcare world for some of their funded research is I think overall a great organization. Plus, you have with organizations like that, because it's still very founder driven. You have, the ability to catch the attention of somebody. So that's great news that you guys are that Callisto is still going. Tell me a little, just to finish it, tell me a little bit about what you think the overall impact is. If there are, I mean, you can presumably estimate, if there's 90% of assaults that are unreported, gives you an idea of how many there might be. How much has Callisto moved the needle on that at various campuses? How many more reports are there sitting? I mean, you must get a ping every time someone reports in the database compared to what actually happened. Give me a sense about how much the uptake of this has been and how you're moving the needle a bit.
Yeah, I think that it's still really early to tell exactly the impact that we're going to make, but we did just recently do a survey, and 90% of respondents of that survey said that they agree that they feel more secure just knowing that Callisto exists and is a resource. But during our pilot, for every 37 entries, one serial perpetrator was identified. And that was a fairly small population. And again, we weren't doing a huge amount of outreach at that time. And so until we really get the outreach going, and we get more of that tipping point of use, we're not going to know the full impact, because I think it's going to be bigger than we expect. And especially going back to those numbers of 90% of sexual assault are committed by serial perpetrators. But we have seen a really big impact. 83% of our users are already reporting. So we're seeing that increase in reporting too. And so we're still analyzing a lot of that survey data that we took at the beginning of the year, and we're going to see more of those impacts. But we're growing significantly. Every month we have more and more users. And even this month, which is, the end of Sexual Assault Awareness Month, when we are recording this, we have a record-breaking amount of users that have created accounts this month. I'm not sure the percentage increase off the top of my head, but it's really significant.
Yeah, and I assume there's, I mean, that there is unfortunately, a vast number of potential users and reporters, given the statements you've been making about the prevalence of the problem. There are obviously a number of these instances, and you mentioned Larry Nassar and others, that have made it through because just they're so awful. But there's presumably there's a whole lot under the radar, which just as you said, don't get reported, and even if they do get reported, it's not regarded as being that big a deal. And it's one of these things where after, I think, Me Too and Harvey Weinstein or whatever, people kind of understand it's going on, but it's still a very taboo, difficult topic. Obviously, it's something where as you mentioned, it's very, very tricky for survivors to know what to do next. And as you said, even if they go through the process, it may just be an awful experience for no outcome. And so, I mean, the idea of getting them, as you're doing, getting them, at least if they're getting them to a counselor, just to know if there's an active multi perpetrator is great. One question though, I mean, if someone's been assaulted and is a survivor and there isn't a match, is there anything that Callisto might in the future do for those people? Because the anonymity and the access to a legal counselor who's sort of not connected to the school or not connected to the police and saying out the issues. I mean, is that something that you've gone down the path of figuring out, or would there just be too much?
Yeah, I mean, when they finish that entry, as you saw in the demo, there is a resource page. So we give them resources. But even like I said, 90% of the respondents agree that they get benefits just knowing that our platform exists. And so I think that it is something to just say that, like, somebody is looking, there's a whole organization out there that's dedicated to finding repeat perpetrators, that it's worth that. And so I think that there is a huge amount to be said with that. And we are talking about more resources. There are a lot of resources out there, and so we don't want to recreate the wheel. And one other thing I want to go back to as well, as far as, like, you talked about business plans and our future and everything, is that one of the questions that we get all the time is, why just schools, and when are we going to expand? And we are working on an expansion plan that will monetize access to Callisto Vault, not for our .edus, that will be free, but to potentially get unions and membership organizations to pay to have access to their members. It will always be free for the survivors, but for those membership
Yep.
organizations to be able to provide this as a service so we can expand access because we know that sexual assault happens well beyond college campuses. We started on college campuses because Jess Ladd, our founder, was assaulted on college at college, and the reporting process was really awful for her. And that was her goal was to reduce college sexual assault and beyond, but to really start in college. And so that's where we're starting. But we have a lot of ideas and a lot of plans to continue to expand. And again, that the biggest hurdle in all of that right now is fundraising
Of course, and
and
that's
resources.
sadly the case for so many organizations. But it's fantastic that you have a brought it back from the brink, and b continue to provide this great service. And thank you very much for coming on board and showing it today.
Thank you for sharing this with your audience. We really appreciate it because we want everybody to know about Callisto.
Right, I've been talking with Tracy DeTomasi. She is the CEO of Callisto, which, if you haven't figured out by now, is a really interesting technology-based service for helping survivors of sexual assault help at least identify repeat perpetrators who are a big problem. So, Tracy, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.